Erin, thank you for being with me today.
Thanks, Harris.
Let's start there. Let's start with the law and order issue and what's happening in Philadelphia, yet another city, Democrat-led city in America, because those are just the facts, that has devolved into nights of violence.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to see because the First Amendment of the Constitution certainly protects people's right to peaceably assemble, but that is not rioting and looting. President Trump is very clearly the president of safety and security, of law and order, and he has offered assistance to any city that has ever seen unrest like we are seeing. It's really heartbreaking to see because if you remember back in August when Kenosha, which is really a city very close to my heart personally, was burning, Joe Biden wasn't condemning that, and he went there to make a political statement. Democrats did not talk about the violence or the rioting or looting at all in the Democrat convention because they know that they can't. They know that those are people who are more likely to vote for them than they are for President Trump. Listen, this is a president who believes in law and order, not only in word, but in action. While Democrats stopped legislation in the Senate, Tim Scott's bill for better policing and better communities, President Trump signed an executive order to do just that, and he stands proudly with the men and women of law enforcement.
All right. President Trump, as we move to the next thing here, also being asked a lot about, if you will, coronavirus. And we're seeing it. It's tough because in places, you mentioned Kenosha, and I used to live next door in Minnesota, the numbers of hospitalizations and running out of beds in Wisconsin is really tough right now. Let's talk about the president's closing message on coronavirus. And I know on the stump it can be different, but he's almost taunting it, saying COVID, 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 COVID. What is his closing message?
Well, the message is clear. The president has fought to protect millions of American lives, and we know Joe Biden would have been leap years behind where the president is when it comes to addressing the virus. I know it's hard for Democrats to remember, but when the president was making the State of the Union address, he mentioned coronavirus, and the next day officials were at the Hill briefing officials on it. I know Nancy Pelosi pulled her political stunt, but it happened then, and the president has surged resources, PPE, ventilators. The White House is tracking what's going on in hospitals to make sure if additional resources are available that they are sent. Ventilators and therapeutics. The president has stood up the largest public-private partnership, and Joe Biden has said that the things that the president has done were wrong. Although his plan for the coronavirus seems eerily similar to the president, just steps behind, which we know would cost American lives. And the only thing Joe Biden would do differently was not stop incoming flights from China, and we know that saved lives. President Trump fights for the American people. He is fighting against the coronavirus, and Joe Biden is an unmitigated disaster who would have put us in a much worse position versus the invisible enemy.
Why does the president, from the lectern then when he speaks, almost make fun of the word COVID with the crowds? I mean, it is something that stands out.
Well, there's so much success in the Trump administration, so many things that should be talked about, as well as his exceptional response to the coronavirus. Just look at the last less than a week in the president's life. Thursday, he had an exceptional performance versus Joe Biden at the debate. The next day, another Middle East peace deal, one of three this president has been able to deliver to make the world a safer place. And then on Monday, what did we see? Justice Amy Coney Barrett, where national networks were not carrying and covering her being sworn in as a mom, a conservative, and a constitutionalist to the Supreme Court of the United States. There are so many things going on in this country. We should be talking about all of them.
I want to get to women voters, but let's hear first on just from Joe Biden about the president's pandemic response, because I'll get your reaction. We'll move on to the next topic.
He takes a lot of big pronouncements and he makes a lot of big pronouncements, but they don't hold up. He gets his photo op and then he gets out. He leaves everyone else to suffer the consequence of his failure to make a responsible plan. It seems like he just doesn't care much about it. And the longer he's in charge, the more reckless he gets. It's enough. It's time to change.
Erin?
Well, 47 years of Joe Biden's failure is not a change anybody in this country should want. We know what Joe Biden's response looks like to a pandemic, and it's abysmal. President Trump has stood up against the Chinese coronavirus to make sure the American people can safely live in this country, to make sure we have PPE and ventilators, and we will have a vaccine in record time and be able to get it to the American people for free because of President Trump. Joe Biden likes to try and take cheap shots from the cheap seats, but we know President Trump has fought for the American people on this, and we know that Joe Biden doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe in the steps that need to be done to save lives.